I understand that the first church in the conference was in Michigan, and the second one was in Iowa, and Fairview was the third church in the conference.
Welcome to Fairview, Oklahoma.
The Cherokee Strip was opened up for settlement. Then the word got out to people around the nation and even some of the world about there was going to be free land available. So the run was in 1893, and people came in horses, wagons, and any mode of transportation they could, or on foot, and they lined up ready to make the run. And the run was held at that time, and then the church began in 1894. But the word got out around the nation and even some of the world that there was going to be free land available, and that's a lot of Sabbath keepers were looking for religious freedom. So they lined up to make the run and made the run. And one person, even when the gun went off to sound the alarm, you could start the run. This one person named Wells, he didn't start when the rest of them did. His wagon was still sitting there, and the others had already started, and he didn't even attempt to go. But he was a Sabbath keeper. He wouldn't make the run on the Sabbath. He still got his land, but he started the run late. He was still able to get some land, even though he didn't start with the initial racers. So he got some land for his residence, he and his family, but the church didn't meet on that land. Well, at first they met in what they called dugouts. In other words, they dug a hole in the side of the mountain, and it's called a dugout. It was just a man-made hole in the side of the hill, and that's where they met first. And then later they progressed to meeting in rural schoolhouses, and one of those places they met was at the school I attended, was the Golden Valley School. But of course I wasn't born at that time. My parents, were. But then they met in rural schoolhouses, different rural schoolhouses around the area, until they could acquire their own property.
In 1921, which is 100 years ago today, this year, they purchased it for the group that had been meeting in churches or other churches, or in schoolhouses, in homes during that time. They actually purchased it from the Mennonite group. Actually, they had to disband for a while because during the war they were mostly of German and Russian heritage, so they couldn't meet, and so they sold their building to our group. I think it was like $1,000 in 1921.
The Sheffields were very important. The Davisons. My grandmother's name was Sheffield, and my mother's maiden name was Davison. So those families were very important. They were part of the group that met in the dugouts and eventually the church. The Fairview Church was very instrumental in starting the Oklahoma Conference, and my Davison, my mother's maiden name was Davison, and so this Davison was treasurer of the Oklahoma Conference when it was originally formed. There was a merger meeting, and I was born in '38, so I was 10 years old at the time of the merger. And so there was a merger meeting where they were merging two different conferences together, one in Carolina and one in different places. So they were merging two or more different groups together, and so they wanted to have a consultation among the ministers as to the feasibility of this and the desirability of joining these conferences. So they looked for a church they thought it was the most neutral that they could find in the U.S. or anywhere to hold this unification conference. So they selected Fairview as the most neutral place to have this conference. And so it was held in 1948. That conference was held in 48. The actual conference was held in the city auditorium, which is a much bigger building. But the church hosted it actually during that time. And in preparation for that meeting, they did a major remodeling to the church because they knew they had quite a bit of time before it was the meeting was going to be held. So the local church wanted to do some upgrading to the building anyway, so they chose that as the time to do it. And so they did a major remodeling, which included installing a new basement. The church didn't have a basement prior to that, but they chose to dig the dirt out with horses and small tractors and dig that dirt out. So today, ever since 1938 when they did that, 1948 when they did it, I was more than 38, they did it in 48. So that made a major difference in the church at that time. And it actually turned the sanctuary around to where the people were sitting in the opposite direction. And so that fixed it so you didn't have to, the people coming in the front door didn't come in and everybody look at them. They changed it to where they came in they changed the sanctuary around where they came in the back door instead of the front door. Well, it was an exciting time, and a lot of things were accomplished at that time, and they had many years of cooperation, working with the groups. It was at least 2 or more groups that joined together, and it resulted in considerable growth opportunities for the church. Several of the ministers that I recall back as a youth, have gone on to other positions with the church, and had a big influence on many other churches. So Fairview has seen its share of very top quality pastors that have gone on to other places and done a lot of very worthwhile things for other churches. So I think we made our mark on the church in that respect.
And the pastors that we've had in the past have been very, very good, and they did some outreach to the jail, and they have brought us some interesting people that we've learned to know and nurtured and have become members of our church.
My brother, Dennis Burrell, he was at Crabtree Correctional Service. He worked there for many, many years. In fact, we would attend there too as part of the group, and they would sing, and then of course Dennis would always have sermons and speak to them. But that was always nice to do. My parents, they would visit ones up there. They had one guy that they saw on a very regular basis, and he would write them letters after about his family and what they were doing, and after he got out even. Yeah, he would write occasionally to them, and it was always interesting to get to see those letters.
Church over the years has purchased some houses in the same block as they became available, and we've used those over the years for various purposes. One time we had a jail ministry. We helped people that came out of prison, and then we would give them a place to live for a while until they got on their feet. So that was the original reason we bought these houses.
Longevity. I think longevity bears a tremendous testimony. For one thing, it says, I'm not a flash in the pan. I'm not here just doing whatever is popular and attractive for the moment, but rather I'm living through purpose, and I'm committed to that mission, that purpose. And the mission of this church may have morphed over time, but they always had a purpose, whether it was to carry on the tradition of Sabbath and appreciation for our rest in Christ, or whether it was the pure and perfect mission of building the kingdom of heaven by making disciples. It's been successful in both levels. And I think whenever we look at 100 years in one building and 127 years in ministry, from their early roots in the sod houses and the schoolhouse and all of that, it gives a testimony to what happens when we persevere through the challenges and the tribulations of life with this purpose, this meaning, that we have something driving us to keep us going. And they still have that. And yes, it's a real challenge passing that from generation to generation, but you can't last 127 years and 100 years in one building without being able to pass that to the next generation. And I'm looking forward to how they're going to hand this on over to the next generation and teach it to do it to the next generation until the Lord comes back.
Well, we just kind of take for granted that it's been 100 years and more, because we're more in a rural area and we're interested in history, and a lot of people aren't. And so that's just the thing, that it's carried on this long. And so that I would ask other people, to use that in their church and in their life to get closer to the Lord, because of all the history that we have.
Who we are is we're a product of our generations before. And if we're challenged to stay true, to do the things that helped us get here so that we can leave it for the next generation,